All right, everybody, welcome to our Fireside chat today. My name is Tushar Patel. I am the CMO here at Cleo. And today I've got Robyn Hyra, who is a director of industry solutions here at Cleo with a particular emphasis in logistics. Robyn, welcome today.
Thank you for having me, Tushar. Good to see you.
All right, likewise. I see that you and I, got the memo and we're both kind of wearing our Cleo swag, and that's kind of a fantastic kind of start to our conversation here. So, Robyn, you've recently joined Cleo, right? As recent as a couple of months ago. But you come from industry. You spent a lot of your time in the logistics industry. And so why don't you just walk our audience through a little bit of your background, kind of what your career looked like and some of the places and some of the types of organizations you've been a part of.
Thank you. That great start. So I started in the logistics industry almost 20 years ago. I ended up here just like many people do. I had little touches upon it throughout my previous careers, but I started just by answering an ad, and I interviewed with the VP of Aljex software, and it was just some logistics thing that I didn't really understand. And so I was with Aljex for just over 10 years. I started out in sales when they were very small. It was less than 10 employees. I started in sales and then worked my way up. Grew a little team around me for sales, and then eventually pulled into marketing. And so through my 10 years there, I did everything from cradle to grave sales, developed an on-site training program, enhanced the entire training program for our customers, onboarded them, on-site training. So as EVP of both sales and marketing with Aljex, I really saw a lot. I had a lot of engagement with customers. Right after we sold to Descartes, I decided to take another turn and see what it was like to live on the dark side at a brokerage. So I went to work with R2 Logistics. It was originally going to be something temporary as I was starting off a side business outside of the industry. But as anyone in logistics always knows, once you're in, you can't get out. And I'm so glad that I didn't really leave. So I started out really just helping to onboard Aljex and ramp up all of the different locations. There were multiple locations at the time. And then I ended up deciding I didn't want to leave. So I approached them about staying on board and relocating to Dallas, Texas. I'm originally an East Coast girl. Grew up in New Jersey and lived in Pennsylvania. And reload to Dallas, and never really looked back. So after 6 years as VP of technology with Aljex, moved on to Cleo. So what I learned at R2 and then previously with Aljex, I'm now able to look at everything in a much different light. And that's what I was really looking forward to doing here at Cleo.
No, that's fantastic. So I'm going to backtrack you. We'll talk about Cleo in a moment. I'm going to backtrack you to talk a little bit about R2. So you said you spent 6 years there. You made a shift from being, on the dark side of sales and marketing. I can say that because I'm on the marketing team, and you went into technology, and you really took ownership of the supply chain technology at R2, the strategy, everything from like the customer experience and how you're leveraging technology to automation and so forth. How would you describe like the evolution of supply chain technology in your 6 years at R2? Like what was that change like from like day one to what is that, day 1800, right? Maybe day 2100, something along those lines.
Math is not a strong point, so I'll just go with what you said. So that's a great question. And I say that really because the timing, I guess in retrospect, I think I have really good timing with things. I'd like to pretend that I always meant to do it, right? But it just somehow I have good timing on things.
Yeah, right place at the right time, and you just happen to be the right person for that. Right?
Exactly.
Love it. Oh, that's great.
Exactly. So when I started with Aljex, it was on the precipice of cloud-based TMS. And Aljex was really an innovator for that, right? And not here to tell that story, but then rather when I moved over to R2, right before COVID, that was also the precipice of a lot of new technologies. So things involving, or at least new to transportation and supply chain, like AI, machine learning, robotic process automation, a lot of, I mean, even with Cleo, we cloudified in what, 2017, and I started with R2 in 2018. So it was really the beginnings of this whole new technical world. R2 was always very tech forward and very open to tech, but I was there while a lot of new types of technologies were coming out. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, right, it was really, it was bad timing for a lot of reasons for the whole world and whatnot. But I think a lot of these new technologies were in like an incubator stage, if you will, where people were realizing the abilities that they had. And I'm talking about more so the tech companies and those the techie smart people, the software people. They realized that there were a lot of technologies out there and they weren't exactly sure how to apply them or where to apply them. And then there were people that had interacted with logistics, and there's a few people that I know that have wonderful technologies now, where they were sort of led to the logistics industry through shippers or manufacturers, whatnot. And they landed in logistics and they were like, wow, you guys do things really old school. And the advantage of the people coming from outside the industry is that what they brought in was the knowledge or understanding that there are ways to automate a lot of these things. The thing about logistics is that everything's very much relationship based and very customer service heavy, also very old school. So we were doing a lot of things in very manual fashion that took a lot of people, took a lot of time, and it was very difficult to find the answers.
And I imagine it was also like difficult to scale, right? As we all know, the only constant in supply chain is the fact that you're going to have disruption, whether that is positive or negative disruption, right? You have a new customer you have to onboard, or in your case, maybe a new carrier or a new shipper that you're trying to onboard, or you have a pandemic and you have certain things to deal with in your pandemic. And so when you're doing things manually, I imagine that can be very, very tough to, quickly respond and have a resilient organization. And so it sounds like you spent a lot of time thinking through that kind of journey from manual to automation. So can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you were able to automate and some of the things that you feel like a lot of organizations maybe haven't automated yet that they should be thinking about?
Sure. So I would say a lot of the back office processes can be automated. There are technologies, mostly like an RPA type technology, where a biller might need to go to multiple platforms to retrieve or enter in information. So there's tools out there that you can utilize to streamline that process or take the human out of it. And at the end of the day, the humans can be redeployed to things that they really need to work on versus repetitive actions. So really, as a whole, what I did was looked at a lot of the things that we were doing with repetitive actions. There were also a lot of areas that there was EDI or API or integration type opportunities that we were able to achieve. We were able to get, let's say, tracking data from one place to another that we didn't used to be able to. We enhanced work with like an LTL platform to help the customer experience. That's always, anything that we can do to help with the customer experience was always a win.
Fantastic. And one thing you said really resonated with me is this whole concept of repetitive action and
Mhm.
automating. And I think, and also redeploying your resources. I actually read a really interesting Gartner report the other day. And what the Gartner report talked about was the disconnect between executives at logistics companies and basically the rest of their staff. And the disconnects were huge, right? The executives always think that transformational initiatives are going to result in outcomes that are going to be beneficial to the business, as we should. But the value of the outcomes were way different. So executives had higher expectations of that value, whereas some of the staff did not. Another one was specifically around automation that you talk about, is that a lot of the times staff don't want to automate tasks because they're they're worried about their jobs, and they're worried specifically about, well, if that part of that my job gets automated, what I'm going to do. And I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen, right? And I think if you take a broader look, it's like, look, when it comes to some of these tasks that you're doing that are going to be automated, it's going to allow you to go from manual, repetitive, valuable, but maybe lower value or lower strategic tasks to focusing in on larger strategic tasks. And in fact, you're going to be a greater asset to your organization because you're actually working on a more strategic project, not a repetitive action that may not take as much skill or knowledge. It just requires time or bandwidth. And it was just a really interesting article because everything that you're talking about, or it was a survey actually that they created into a research report. It's very interesting that you say these things because everything you're talking about, automation, like utilizing technology and applying the technology appropriately. There just was a lot of disconnect within organizations because it really stemmed from this concept, I felt like, of fear. People are afraid of doing things differently, and that makes sense because human beings are creatures of habit, like in general. So how did you get over any fears that you had within your organization as you were going through any of this transformation, any of these changes? You have any advice for folks today on how to manage that fear and even anxiety amongst the technology teams?
This is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. I have so much to say on it. And as a matter of fact, I'm on a vendor advisory committee with the TIA. We're doing a webinar next week. It's somewhat of a fireside chat where we're talking about things to do before, during, and after a tech conference. And it's going to be heavily like things that you need to think about. And one of those things, to circle it back around, is to communicate with the staff that's doing the thing, find out what the challenges are. And it's almost, everybody talks about like the sandwich methodology, right? So you have to bring the C-suite and then the doers together, understanding what the problem is, what could we together do to solve it. Or if a lot of times the C-suite will learn about a technology and they'll say, oh, this is great, let's implement it. But they're not talking to the people who are actually doing the job. And it is delicate because the people doing the job, to your point, they have that fear, the fear of them losing their job, aside from the fact that fear of change really is a thing. But you have to
It's a two thing. It's two things. It's not just, it's fear of losing my job, and it's also, okay, if I'm overcoming that, it's the fear of change on top of that.
Yes, it's really it's very difficult, but I really do believe that you have to work together, and a good way to do that, and something that I would try to do, especially when I was first coming on board with R2, was that I went around to people on the floor and I asked them, like, show me what you're doing today. And I would do this a lot with Aljex when I did on-site training. And I sat with the billing staff, and all I would see them doing with multiple monitors, and it was like early stages of multiple monitors. We used to preach that. Now it's like, I don't know what I would do without 4 screens. People will copy paste, they'll have 20 different tabs open, they're going from thing to thing, and they're like, I do this, and then I copy and I paste and I move it over here and I do that, and then I go to this website and I do that, and my head would literally spin. And I say, I don't know what you're doing. And all I kept thinking is, why are they working that hard? It should be easier. And
Yeah.
why isn't it easier? And why do they, and I'd say, well, how often do you have to do this? They're like, well, this is what I do all day. They've got spreadsheets, copy, paste, the whole thing. And now there's technologies that can help with that. And to your point, yes, it's a more strategic role that they can be playing, right? Or they can dig into the outlier problems that really take a human to work through. So how do you get that alignment? I think you have to really just one-on-one spend time with the people so that you can truly understand what is it that they do, and then take your own assessment of like what you think could be automated, and then ask them, would your day be easier if we could automate this? And would you like to spend more time of your day doing this? Or where do you think we're missing out? Right? They're very knowledgeable. They may not be the same as you or have the same skill set, but they really
Sure.
understand what it is that they do. And
They
they
understand
may
that process.
exactly. And they
Yeah.
may understand that there's a better way to do it. And then you also find out who might be a really good leader and who would
Mm.
be really good to be that champion of change, because people want to listen to others that are like them, not somebody that's already on their team.
Yeah, no, that, fantastic things that you said, right? I think a couple of things that you said, if I was to summarize, right? When you sit down and you seek to understand, then you can seek to inspire and seek to change, right? So that's number one. You implemented something that I read about. There's this book out there that, in fact, when I came to Cleo, Mahesh, our CEO, gave me this book, and it's called The First 90 Days. And the
Mm.
entire concept in the first 90 days is do not make any changes in the first 90 days, but instead seek to understand. And when you do that, you're going to be able to build trust, number one, but number two, you're actually going to understand. And so now you know what changes to make versus just a change that you heard about at an event or a change that you read about on LinkedIn or read about it at an article at your, last, CIO gathering. But when you do those two things, when you seek to understand, and you communicate the why, and you sandwich and you bring these two groups together with the idea that we are trying to make your life better, right?
Mhm.
It's not just about, cost cutting, or it's not just about this. It's also about making your team's life better. I think that's fantastic advice to give, because then people can break that fear of change, break the fear of, you're taking something away from me type of a scenario. I love it. I love it. So let's just call a spade a spade. So R2, when you were there, you were a Cleo customer.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
we'll talk a little bit about what compelled you to, come over to Cleo. But before we do that, I think it's important to talk a little bit about what was R2 utilizing Cleo for? Like, what role did we play in your overall transformation and your overall technology stack? And then we can get into, what compels you to completely join the dark side.
Or to go back to the dark side, who knows? Depends on which side you're on, right? So we had an on-premise solution of Cleo. It was a solution that was selected before I started. And we really just used it to manage our own EDI. And I think it was great, great innovation by the predecessors there before me, to realize the value of being able to control all of your own EDI. It's unfortunate, and I saw it firsthand, that you if you're reliant on someone else for the speed of onboarding or making changes to your it's your loads or whatever the information is that's transpiring back and forth. If you're beholden to a third party service that has a laundry list of other customers that may be bigger or smaller than you, people paying more money, other integrations, other roadmaps, etc., you are giving up that control to onboard a customer, or you're halting revenue, right?
Yeah,
So,
and going back to your point, like the so much of the logistics business, regardless of what your role you play, is based on relationships. And if you don't have control over little things like visibility or changing things, or you have a customer who's really excited to start working with you, maybe it's a shipper, maybe it's a carrier, right? Depending on that particular situation. And you slow down that process of getting them onboarded, you really lose momentum that's there. And so getting control over that situation is one of those things that you need to strive to have, is more and more control, so that call it self-service, right? But just having control over that scenario. So the effort was there to help have more control, but then over time, you also went from on-premise to cloud, right? And so a lot of times folks feel like, well, if I'm going to go to the cloud, I'm going to lose control, because the perception is now that technology is sitting on someone else's hardware and it's running somewhere else. It's not running it within the walls of my building, not running on my network. I can't I have complete control. Even I have to upgrade. Now they're going to upgrade and moving to the cloud. So how did that movement from on-premise Cleo software, where you had complete control, how did you transition that to cloud? And what was the experience like as a customer from a control perspective?
mhm. So one thing that I definitely want to address is, like, part of the reason to move to the CIC, to Clio's cloud, was the growing need for disaster recovery, right? And security, risk, all of that. Fraud was becoming rampant, and thank goodness, especially under my watch, and previously, we had never had like a breach type situation, right? But it's like insurance, right? You never know when you're going to need it, but when you need it, it's there.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely.
it just had me sort of really digging into a lot of things. And then I would challenge anyone to look at their business and say, is my business more secure than a business whose sole focus is to make sure it's secure? Like, a logistics company is a specialist in moving freight. It may not be a specialist in security or the best ways for data movement, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm tremendously lucky that my husband is in construction and is a master carpenter. He could do plumbing and everything, right? If I have a dream, he can build it. Not everyone's that lucky, but
Yeah. I just laugh
but
because we just went through a recent house remodel, and I totally understand what you're saying. So totally get it.
right.
Yep. Yep.
So did you hire a contractor?
Absolutely, we did.
That's right. Could you have done any of it alone? Right.
Nah,
So
some of it,
sure.
yeah, but
Right.
yeah,
Sure. So when you're going to do some of it on your own, let's say you get the quote and it's X dollars, and you're like, well, I could probably knock down that wall. And then you go with a sledgehammer and you go and you knock down that wall and you're like, oops, I didn't realize the plumbing and the electrical was behind there. Right. Or,
yeah,
oh, geez,
yeah.
I didn't realize that was that it was a weight bearing wall. And then all of a sudden it's a bigger
You
problem. So
added risk. You think you're doing something, and it's interesting you say that, because I in my previous life, I worked for a company that provided security solutions,
Mhm.
and it was all encryption solutions. And oftentimes people would take open source crypto libraries and build security into their product. And most breaches, I think there was a number out there, it was like 78 or 80-ish% of breaches happened because security was implemented incorrectly. Not because you didn't think about it, Not
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't do something about it, you just did it incorrectly. No different than if I built a load-bearing wall and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the proper frame and structure, then that load-bearing wall can't accept the load, right? Of your
Mm-hmm.
second floor or your roof or whatever. And now you've added risk for that, wall to cave in. It's no different. And you're right. Cleo, as an example, we have an entire compliance team and an entire security team, and their job is 24/7 to look after the compliance. They go through all of our SOC, they go through all of our ISO, they go through all of the data at rest, data and movement encryption, make sure everything is done, and they are specialists in that particular area. And so security is a big concern. Can you talk a little bit about control over like the day to day?
Mm-hmm.
What happened? How did your life or your team's life change going from the on-premise version of Clio to Clio Integration Cloud, which is our cloud platform?
Sure. So I remember asking the manager, probably about 6 or 8 months after we implemented CIC, and he's like, "Oh, it's great." And I'm like, "But explain to me what's great." Right? Because I'm not him. I can't develop, I can't code, I can't do any of those things. I can't, map a 204. I'm more of a visionary type person. So he's like, "Oh, it's great. Yeah, I'm really getting into the CIC and I'm doing this and I'm doing that." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool. But like, could you just like in a almost like an elevator pitch or a concise 1 minute, if I were to share with the executives, what do you find the real value?" And he said it great. It was essentially what used to take me an entire day or days to triage, I'm able to do in a matter of seconds or minutes. I was like, that's all I need, right?
That's all. Yeah, it's phenomenal. That's
That's all
awesome.
I
And
need.
as someone who's been with Clio for a little bit longer than you, and who's been part of that journey, that is one of the things that we said we want customers to be able to say that, right? And it's
Mhm.
not that because the our older generation of on-premise products didn't have that. It was really that those were point solutions, and CIC takes a complete end-to-end view through a platform, and it's
Mhm.
a modern platform built on the cloud, and all of the usability, all of the user experience is designed exactly for that. It's designed to give you the complete visibility and transparency into every little itty bitty part of that end-to-end transaction. So whether it's a 204, it doesn't matter. You can see exactly where things are, and if something were to go wrong, because we all know it will go wrong, right? You'll have your internet connection could have died. Somebody could have, manually typed in something incorrectly. It's giving you the ability to quickly figure out what's going wrong. And I love
Mhm.
that. That is music to my ears, because I know when we often spend time strategizing about the customer experience, that's one of the things that we really focus in on. And what's nice about that is, and hopefully you're going to get into this a little bit, is you were able to provide that control, and almost elevate the level of control from going from the on-premise to the cloud. Did you utilize any of Clio's services as part of
Mhm.
as part of the engagement with Clio?
Sure, we did. There was one particular situation that we needed to integrate with a tool that did not currently integrate with our TMS. So had we not moved to the cloud to do, we could not have done this, right? So that was a particular use case. It was with a real-time visibility platform that we needed to integrate with. And, even let's just say, even if the TMS was willing to integrate with it, it's going to take their team time. It's going to get put on the list of things, and then it's got to be put into, the sprint, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Where with us, we were in control of our own destiny. We had the freedom to integrate or work with any tool that we want to, especially something that has an open API, but certainly any other way. And then we could do it on our own timeline, right? So it was our choice to be able to prioritize or shift priorities however and whenever we needed to. And so my team was in the midst, when we decided to go to the CIC, my team was in the midst of a host of other projects rather. And so what and your team, the Cleo team, my now team, the Cleo team had a lot more expertise that we could tap into. So with the move to the CIC, to the cloud, we also were able to take advantage really of the blended service and part of the fully managed service as well. So what I did was leverage Cleo's internal resources to do a couple of different projects while my team worked on onboarding or making the move from premise over to CIC for some of our trading partners. And for our particular scenario, there were some reasons why we wanted to move our customers to CIC versus Cleo doing that load for us. You know, there's just like a lot of things that needed to be cleaned up and whatnot. So I was able to have Cleo do so much of that. It was actually a very impressive experience, and sounds like a paid advertisement, though it's not. But it was in a very eye-opening experience. Another one of my very passionate points is the onboarding process with the technology company. And while we were already Cleo customers, it was different. It was really completely shifting products with Cleo. But does the salesperson at the technology person give all of the intel to the onboarding team, and do they give it all to the customer success team? And then do the tech people who are doing the work really get the full message? And you know, through the COVID years, all of these new technologies popped up. We greenlit a whole bunch of technologies that we didn't have before. I had lots of projects, including the Cleo one, going on at the same time. And all I kept thinking every day with some of the other technologies was, oh my gosh, like they oversold and under-delivered. And there's the communication, you know, when, listen, with Algex, we weren't perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? But I did cradle to grave, and that's how I taught my team, cradle to grave. You find that sale, you sell them, you demo them, you explain it, you know your product. They bring up certain scenarios to you. You can help work through them, answer intelligently. If your tool can solve them, then you work with them through the sale, you train their staff, and then if need be, or if they wanted to, we would go on site. And then you were with them for customer service and success all the way through. I carried that account all the way through. So I really, really knew that account. I just got off the phone with one of my former customers earlier today. You know, we still talk, and I'm still helping them with some Algex things, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like tapping into that knowledge. And I found that the Cleo circle was very tight. And now from the inside, I see why. I mean, there's a ton of alignment and communication, and the amount of people that are involved in a sale is extremely impressive, and it comes through on the customer side.
I love it. Love it. I mean, you're right. We've spent a lot of time on tying the different processes together, and not our customers' processes, but the process of migration, the process of onboarding, and the process of adoption. Because ultimately, that's what you want to have as well. It's not just migrating over, but it's also ensuring adoption, which means training, which means support. And if you have any questions, it's running sidecar. So if you're doing certain things within the platform that you think that the customer needs to understand, it's making sure that they're writing sidecar with you as well. So that's great to hear. So the last question I really have for you, I kind of have two questions, but I know we're bumping up against time here. You've been really gracious with your time, so I don't want to take up too much, but in like a minute or two, what was so compelling about that entire journey that you wanted to join Cleo, and basically be on the other side of that conversation?
Sure. Um, I don't think that I know I wouldn't be in the role I am now without the experience that I had with R2. On the brokerage side, you really got to see and feel the day to day, and I learned a tremendous amount. Implemented. I felt like I came, I saw, I conquered, and I like leaving on a high, right? And it was just the right time. I saw so much fragmentation in the market. I saw the lack of like the integrations, how they, I hate to use the word again, like just very disjointed. And I felt that there was a better way to bring together all of the technology with both Aljex and R2. A lot of my relationship was working with third-party vendors, like software vendors, all these complementary tools. And I originally thought that I really wanted to go into more of like a partner, like a partner type of a role, to work with a software company and just manage the partnerships. I really missed the customer facing part a lot. Having that interaction and looking to solve problems and having a lot of different ones, I missed a lot of that, and that's why I came to Cleo.
I love it. I love it. It was a right place at the right time. You bring tremendous amounts of experience, in the trenches experience, as I like to call it, right? It's not just, thought leadership and ideas, but it's ideas that you actually executed. And it's nice because you're able to come into conversations and talk about and leverage your experience and tie that with other folks. So if anybody who was listening today ever wants to have a conversation with Robyn about her experiences and some of the road mapping that she did at R2, and how, over that 6-year journey that she was there, some of the transformation that she was able to give to the organization and really quarterback some of those initiatives and how that really led to growth. So we're super thrilled that you're here, Robyn. The last question I have for you is quite simple. You've seen a lot. You spend a lot of time talking to customers. You spend a lot of time reading. If you were to take a look at the market, what do you see happening in the logistics market over the next 6 to 12 months, and what is kind of your high level advice for folks that are listening today?
So none of us have a crystal ball. I think over the last year, a lot of people woke up every day, looked in the mirror, and wished for the market to change, and sprinkled in some hope that, hey, I think things are going up, or we're seeing this, we're seeing a shift in the market, and we keep getting blips of that for sure. I would say the common thread between vendors and customers that I speak with are that people are kind of waiting to see what happens this fall. That is going to be, I think, the big indicator. And, there are definitely people out there who say, like, it's just an excuse that we use every 4 years. The other 3 years is just some other excuse, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I think our friend in Tampa would call me out on that one for sure. Um,
Fine.
so, I don't know. It has to change. It really does. I think there's the holiday season, which in logistics really kind of starts more September. It's back to school. The cool thing with Cleo is that we get the predecessor stuff to that, or the leading trends, because
Yeah,
we're
the
working with.
precursors to all that, the manufacturers. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
exactly. So it's that this kind of stuff is super cool to me, is that, we're seeing that manufacturing spiking. We see the data, and it's not that we're monitoring people's transactions, but in the monthly meetings and things, we go over the trends of 204s and 214s, and we are seeing that uptick. So I think we're just at that point where people are still feeling it in their pockets, where they can't really
Yeah,
spend, but they want to. But I still think
totally.
it's still gonna be a little, I don't wanna say soft, but I don't think it's not gonna spike like we all hope it will be, but I'm hoping to see this continual gradual change, and then we'll see what happens in November.
Good. Well, I would agree with you. I think everything that I read, everything I see, is everybody is optimistic of for at least the next 6 to 12 months for things to start to pick back up. Maybe we won't,
Mhm.
like you said, we won't get back to the some of the boom that we saw during the pandemic and post-pandemic, but
Mhm.
we'll get back to, higher levels than what we've been seeing over the last 12 to 18 months.
Yes, you have to throw
We,
out the COVID years, and that's what everyone
yeah,
says. Throw out the COVID years because it's a bubble. It's really fake.
totally.
Hmm.
Exactly, exactly. Well, fantastic, Robyn. I appreciate all the time that you spent with us here today. You left a lot of great nuggets. Everything from thinking about, what repetitive actions you can automate to how you can bring your staff and executives together to work on strategic initiatives and break some of the fear of change and fear of transformation, all the way through talking about your journey with Cleo at R2 and how Cleo was able to help you there and a little bit about, the future and the crystal ball there. So we kind of touched on a lot of different topics today. So really appreciate you spending time. And for those of us that are listening today, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to sales@cleo.com. We also have a lot of demos of Cleo Integration Cloud up on the website. We also do some live demos from time to time. So check those out if you're interested. And of course, I'm signing up Robyn for any conversations that you may want to have. If you want to pick her brain on anything from TMSs and technology and logistics to transformation initiatives and leadership and how to work with teams, whether you're an individual contributor and you want to have conversations with an exec, or you're one of the executives that's listening today and is focused on trying to, bridge the gap with the rest of your team. Robyn has a tremendous amounts of experience doing that. So we are grateful that you're here at Cleo and on our team versus some other teams. And with that being said and done, enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for the time.
Thank you, Tushar. Good to see you.
Likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye.